important to have, and important to have like right now, especially because there's been a whole lot like going on. I know that like our kids are just kind of getting back into school, but this is when they start getting real comfortable and they start doing, all sorts of craziness. I know there's a teacher shortage, there's all of these things, right? But I got to thinking because, subsequently I had my own personal thing happen this week where I really had to become very like aware of how I was talking about myself. And I was listening to this book. I just audio booked this phenomenal book. Like I listened to this book. It's probably been maybe 2 days. Every chance I got an opportunity to listen to this book, I was listening to this book. I
So
was
what is this book? Do tell.
Oh my gosh. So the book is called Leaving Breezy Street.
Leaving Breezy Street. Currently
Yeah.
Googling Leaving Breezy Street.
So it's by some memoir by an amazing person. People have probably seen her before. And now that I'm thinking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, she was on Maury. Like I remember that episode when she was on Maury. So it's Brenda Myers Powell's memoir. She is an
Okay.
ex-prostitute in the city of Chicago,
Oh,
and
from
it's her.
Chicago.
Yes, and so she has this amazing foundation called Dreamcatchers Foundation, and it's centered around um, helping with sex trafficking and stuff. So she's like out in the community, in the streets, helping women that are in the game, just giving them tools to get out and just being like a support. So this book was
It's
so
not that it's not that expensive. I was looking it up as you were saying.
look,
So Kindle is only $11.99.
it's worth it. Like this book,
Hardcover is $23.99, and
this
paperback is $17.99
book
on Amazon.
is phenomenal. I could not stop listening. I could not stop listening. Every chance I got the last couple of days, I was like, I have to listen to it again. And the
And it's
person,
free on audiobook if you have a membership. If you have a membership with audiobook, it says it's free.
I would like for people to purchase this book. Like, I'm going to buy
Yeah.
a copy because I'm hoping that I could actually meet her and talk to her because you already know, like, that's my passion is
Mm-hmm.
helping and raising awareness on sexual abuse and just sexual violence and sex trafficking is part of that, etc. But when I say her story is just like in freaking incredible, it was not a dull moment of this book. It was that good. And so I was just listening to the book and it's talking a lot about like generational curses and trauma and how it kind of like affected her into getting into life. Like she had a lot of stuff that was like generational.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it just started sparking like all of these different thoughts, right? And so one of the things that I found myself thinking a lot about is how kids hear us talk about each other. So not even just like black people as a whole, but how they hear us talk about black women, how they hear us talk about black men, and what they do when they hear that, how they internalize that language and it becomes a part of who they believe that themselves are and how they feel about themselves. And so it just really, really just hit me hard because I was just thinking about a lot of my own generational trauma and curses, like listening to this book. And one of the things that I think is really important is if there are people that are not with their children's other parents, so like their baby mamas or their baby daddies. I hate saying that, but if y'all not together, being very mindful with how you talk about the other parent because that kid is going to internalize that. If they hear you talking bad, like that could even be if y'all together, like if y'all
Yeah.
married, I have to be very conscious of what I hear the kids hear me, like let them hear me say. Like if I'm having a rough time or we done got into a disagreement, like I don't want them to hear me talking about their father a particular way and vice versa. Because what I say about him, they're gonna internalize. What he
Yes.
says about me, they're going to internalize. And we don't
Yes.
always think about how the way we talk about each other, that filters into the way our generations feel about themselves. So a lot of these kids is acting out. You don't know what they think about themselves. You don't know why they think that way about themselves. And it could be a lot of just your own talk, your own self talk. How am I talking about myself? That was something that happened, like, being mindful that I'm not putting myself down around my kids. I see you with the changing of the
You
background,
see
sis. What's
me?
happening?
I'm working it
I
out,
see
sis.
you. I see you. You trying to find that
Because I was
spaceship
like,
like
I
Greg
see
at.
you. You know
No.
what I see? I was like, hold on, let me step my game up real quick. I found it.
Yes, and I just noticed that my "Oh, we gonna talk" in the background is backwards. I'm like, I need to flip that. I need to mirror that.
I
It's,
think it's a
it's
setting for that.
backwards, but that's okay. They know what it say. They know what it is. But yeah,
Because
that
it's
was my
oh, we
thought
gonna
about this conversation today. It's just us talking about how we talk about each other and how that affects the generations around us and beyond us about how they feel about themselves. And so we needed to have that
yeah.
conversation.
And I want to add one thing that you said. I was watching a Red Table Talk just the other day, and I haven't seen Red Table Talk in like a billion years. So it popped up in passing, and it was about um what is it called, disappearing a parent or something. It's a term for it. I can't remember the term, but basically it's when one parent basically snatches the child out of the other parent's life, right? And
Mm,
when that happens, because is it Teddy, um the music producer, he used to be in the singing group back in the day, he had posted a tweet or something on social media about how he hasn't seen his son in 3 years, right?
mm,
And the fight that he's going through in the courts with his child's mother, and he has umpteenth children, I think like seven or some or plus children. And so this is the youngest child, but he's there for all of his children because
mhm.
he said growing up he didn't have his father, so he always said that he was going to be there for his children. So it's like really eating him up that he can't be there for his son, right? And his money issues. But I bring this up because the family after them was a white family, and the mother and father had a messy divorce, and she snatched the child from him, right? I mean, snatched the child from him, fought him to the teeth and nails in court. He fought for a while, but he ended up giving up. Like, you know what? I just hope one day she has to change her heart and let me see my child. And so the girl, the actual child, was there. And so they interviewed her. And what she said is that the mother would always talk about the father like in a negative light and put him down. And so she internalized that as a problem with her. So the mother might have been saying like, "Oh, your daddy ain't no good. He didn't pay the child support," or "Oh, your daddy this, your daddy that." But every time she said something like that to the little girl, which is now a grown woman, she internalized that as I'm a part of him, he's a part of me. So that means that is something wrong with me. It means I'm all of those things. I'm irresponsible. I'm this, I'm that. And she was saying that it's so many children that go through situations where the parents are talking about each other, and though the children may not say anything, they're internalizing all those words that you're saying about their parent because that's a piece of them. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
if my daddy is that, or my mama is that, then I must be some of that too. And
It's
so,
impossible not to feel that way. I'm gonna have to check this Red Table Talk out because I didn't even see that one. So I'm
mhm.
gonna find it when we get off this conversation because now I'm curious because
Yeah, it was really interesting. And for her to say that, really just made it click. Like, we really don't know how much just the things we say, even if it's not directly directed towards our children, how it impacts them. Because as a child, we don't have the logic. Like as children, we can't break it down and rationalize it. Oh, she feels this way about him because of her hurt and trauma, so therefore it's not directed. Ain't no kid rationalize. Grown folks ain't even rationalizing like that.
Mm-mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-mm.
So as a kid, all I know is this person is a part of me and I'm a part of this person, and you talking about them, so that must mean I'm the same way. Right.
Additionally to that, how about when you have a parent that reflects that other parent in that child? So it's like, just like your daddy, or
Mhm.
you look, or your daddy was just like that, or you ain't gonna be like just like your daddy, or when
Right.
they're
And
saying
that,
stuff like
I'll
that.
holler off and hit somebody if I heard them say something like that to each other.
Listen, I mean, but it happens. It
Yeah.
happens a great deal. So if you are already likening the child to that parent that you're bad mouthing all the time, when you say those things, what is that child gonna feel about themselves? Like, how are they gonna feel? How are they gonna see themselves when you talk about yourself in that way? Well, that was a real big eye opener for me. Like,
Yeah.
hearing myself, like, you just be thinking out loud sometimes. You be frustrated, say some stuff, and I be like, man, I just can't get this right today. But then I started noticing that when I'm hard on myself like that, my children, they're being hard on themselves in that same way. They're
Because
picking
we teach
themselves
them
apart. We teach them
even
that.
when we're not trying to. Kids, if y'all got kids or around kids, like they are mirrors. Just today, we were putting something in the air fryer, right? And so we had to really clean the
The
air fryer
genius.
because you just be using the air fryer, you don't really clean it every time. And
I
so
love my air fryer.
we had to clean it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't sure if it was ready to be used yet. And so we were like, let's go check it out. So Julia was like, okay, let's go check it out. So we go check it out, and he plug it up and he like, is it working? And I'm like, yeah, it actually is. It's working. You can come turn it on and press the button because I let him press the buttons. And so he goes over, and when he unplugged it and plugged it back up, and I'm like, it's working, baby, it's good. And he's like, it's working. I said, yeah. He said, yo, and I was like, that's my son. Cause I do that all the time. Like, yo, you know what I'm saying?
Let
And
me
I
tell
was
you.
like, it was just that moment, like that was me. That was all me in that moment. I was not even, I've never heard him say that before. And he was just like, yo, like it's working. And I'm like,
They sponges. They're sponges, and they're constantly absorbing the
yes.
environment they're surrounding. And if you're filling them with those type of words about, hey, Uncle Gino,
Hey,
Uncle
hey.
Gino gonna always show up. Welcome, welcome,
For
welcome.
sure.
But if they hear you talk about their other half of them, because to the point of I'm part of this person,
Mm-hmm.
you are half of that person.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to believe like they talking about this in me too. Like I'm part of this person. So they, what if I start to act like that? What if I make them feel this way? Are they gonna talk
Right.
about me like that? Like, are they gonna not love me anymore? And we have to be very conscious about when we're, showing our frustrations, even because you're human. Like, who's not going to be
Mm-hmm.
frustrated, about that other person at times? But just really being mindful that you're not having that type of conversation in earshot of this baby, earshot of
Or
this
even
kid.
how you handle your frustrations. Cause Jaleel checked me the other day. We were in the car and we were leaving out. We had a whole show on that, right? Getting kids to school and the stresses and all of that stuff. So
Yes.
I was a little stressed, but I wasn't necessarily stressed or irritated at him. It was just a busy day for me. So I'm in my head going over all these things. And so we were got in the car and he was like, Mom, are you frustrated? And I'm like, nah, baby. I'm like, because I don't think I really was. It was just me thinking about all the things I had to do in that day. And so I'm like, nah, baby, I'm not frustrated. And he's like, Mom, I said, yeah, baby. He said, you have to feel your feelings. My 4-year old, right? You have to feel your feelings. And I immediately stopped and was like, you know what? You're exactly right, baby. Because that's how I talk to him. Right? Going back to their sponges. What you pour into them is what they're going to pour out either to themselves or to the world. So when he's frustrated, I tell him to calm down, take deep breaths, use your words, let's communicate, feel how you feel, and let me know so I can help if I can. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So now, and I'm in that moment, he sees me frustrated. He's like, you have to feel your feelings, mother. And that was so beautiful because I'm like, he's getting it. And he's getting the things I want him to get. You know what I'm saying?
And
But
they're gonna get the
imagine the
things they
opposite.
don't want you to get. Like,
Right, right. Because imagine the opposite of that, because our
yeah.
voice becomes their inner voice, how they talk to themselves, but also how they talk to other people. And so,
Yep.
how we talk to ourselves is how they think it's okay to talk to themselves. So, if you make a simple mistake and you walking around like, "Oh, you stupid! How you end up?" And they looking at you like, "Oh, okay. So if I make a mistake, I'm dumb. I'm stupid, or I can't get
And
something
that's
right."
gonna be the self-talk that they have from here on out.
Exactly.
Like, and we have to really, really, really address that. When we start talking about the behavior of our kids now, I feel like there's a lot of things that's being overlooked and people are not including in that conversation. Like, what are these kids seeing all the time and hearing? Like, kids are hearing and seeing so much more than their emotions can handle, right? And they're internalizing that too. I think it was the gentleman that you work with for talking trash, and he was talking about his inspiration for cleaning up his neighborhood and just how he didn't want to look at his neighborhood because if it was trash like that, it made him feel a particular way about living in that environment. Words can be just as toxic as trash on the ground or a dirty house, or anything else that we would look at as like neglectful. It can be neglectful if you are using words around this child, around these children, and they're going to internalize that in some way. They're going to
Yeah.
pull all of that in and absorb all of that in. So to your point of talking about, like, if they make a mistake, how you approach that mistake that they make is
Right.
very important, because it's
Mhm.
going to set the standard for how they treat themselves when they make a mistake.
Exactly.
Outside of if they gonna come to you and talk to you when they make the mistake, because that's a
That
whole
part.
other important topic. Like, they are gonna make mistakes where they're gonna need some extra support and help, and they're not gonna feel comfortable coming to you because of how you made them feel the first
And
time.
our parents are not our parents, our children, our parents too, though. That's a whole nother thing. But our
Right.
children are afraid to make mistakes. They're
So afraid.
literally terrified of making mistakes, so much so that they're at the point that they don't even want to try, because of how the teacher, the parent, the whomever, the peers is going to react to that mistake. We attack mistakes. And so, again, use an example with Jaleel doing homework. If the assignment was to draw in within the lines, follow the structure. So if he bumped the line or goes out of the line, technically, that's wrong or a mistake, right? So he asked me, he was like, "I went out of the line right there. Are you mad at me?" And I
Mm,
said, "Absolutely not, sweetie. This is practice. That's what it's for. You make the mistake, and then the next time you try it, you're going to go a little slower, be a little more focused, and you're going to get it right. And each time you practice, you're going to get better. But you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay." Right?
yeah.
Now, in some situations, and this has been me in the past before I found some chill, helping kids with homework is frustrating.
Oh, it's
You
right.
know? So,
How many apples? We got 5 apples.
you
That's
feel
literally.
me?
I'll be like, oh, I've been there. I've been so there. I've
Ain't
been.
nobody perfect. I've been there. I had to apologize to Solomon one time because I was helping him with homework, and I remember being extra frustrated, like overly. He didn't even remember. He like, "What you talking about?" He was little, and I'm like, "If I'm apologizing, you don't remember, but I'm apologizing because I need to. I'm sorry.
Right.
I should
'Cause I
have
know
kept
better
it
now.
away. I'm better now." You know what I'm saying?
I
But
know.
that part, they're so afraid of being wrong. And that goes with how we talk to them and ourselves, that
You
they're
know what
afraid to
though,
make
sis?
mistakes.
Alternatively, sometimes they feel like there's no point of return when they do make a mistake. So then they kind of grow into this. Well, I done already messed up, so I can't fix it, so I don't care. So
Mm-hmm.
that's also the opposite. If you handle that mistake like it's the end of the world and there's no redemption and they can't come back and it's gonna change their whole life, like they're gonna give
They
up.
might as well just go on a downward
They
spiral.
gonna forget it. They
Life
just don't.
ruined.
They
Skip
don't
it.
care anymore about anything. And I think
Yeah.
that also goes back to the point of like how they hear us talk to each other. I feel
Mm.
like we also got to be giving each other a little bit of grace to make certain mistakes. And
And
we
that's
have like, we don't do that anymore. And I get it. I get it. I'm not going to say that it's to like each person's or each group of people's fault, because sometimes there's some of us that's given so many chances and then we just get tired of being stepped on, and people, because after a while it's not a mistake, it's a habit. So
Right.
we tend to be like, okay, well, you know what, like I ain't giving nobody no chances, no more grace, I'm not doing that. But it kind of makes us cold towards each other, and then we
Mm-hmm.
talk about each other in that way, and then subsequently the next generation is hearing us talk about each other in that frustrating way. It's kind of like, I know that I've been seeing a lot of posts about, women, and you just can't this, and women so this, and black women so that. And it's like, okay, so if you talking about black women in that respect, what do you think young black girls are going to internalize when you're talking about black women? When you making that general statement about
Mm-hmm.
all black women are this way, and you talking about them in such a negative, down putting way, what a little black girl is going to think about themselves? Is that the type of representation you want your daughter to have of herself? If you talking
That
about her
part.
mama like she ain't this and she ain't that, and she this and she that, and calling her out her name, you think that as her, you know, relating to that mom, and like, well, I'm a female, well, I'm a woman, I'm a girl, so if that's how he feels about my mom, that's how he feels about me, and vice versa for our little boys.
And then going into that point too, where it's like, all right, if that's what you say I am, I'm gonna be that then.
Yeah.
And they take on those traits and characteristics. Like, okay, if you already think I'm that, then let me be that. And
Yeah.
that can go left too. But to what Anika said in the comments, some parents need to stop using their children as therapists. Absolute fact. Your
Hmm.
children are your children. They aren't even your friends, let alone your therapist. Like, there has to be some type of boundaries where your children does not know everything. Like, talk to them, be transparent, show them your humanity. I just had a really human conversation with my mom earlier this week, and I'm like, man, all of my years of life I never knew that. And we had a moment. Be honest, but do that at a certain age. One, be age appropriate with that honesty and humanity and openness, okay? But also, it's some things that they just don't need to know. If they daddy is trash, because let me tell you something, I'm gonna be 100% honest, my daddy is trash.
But you gonna see that. Like
But
you
my
gonna see
mama
that.
never, to this day, she still don't talk about my daddy in a negative light. To this day, she doesn't talk about that man and won't let us play too much about it. And we've all grown, okay? So we never heard that from her. We didn't have to. We got old enough and figured it out. Like, my God not here. You know what I'm saying? And
That's
so
the
you
part for
don't
me.
have to do so much. But
That's the
I think
part.
I told this story on the show before about when I was living in South Shore and I had a thin wall with the neighbors next door. You remember me telling you about this?
Keep going. It might ruffle.
So literally, like, a wall was separating my room and the next apartment, and it was my bedroom and the woman's bedroom next door. Woo, I was so happy when we moved up out of there. I was
You have
like,
heard some things.
woo, child. I was on like edge of calling DCFS every 2 seconds because she had several children from what I can hear. I couldn't point the lady out if you showed me her picture, but she had minimum 3 children that I could hear that was old enough to talk. She had a boyfriend that was not about nothing. They would be in there fighting all the time. The girl was older. Again, I've never seen any of them, but this is how much I can hear. Right, the girl was older, maybe like 2 boys, I think, under that, and I think the mom lived there too. Her mom. How that
Mm-hmm.
happened and all this going on in the house, baby. But one day, she was having a full blown conversation with her daughter about her father, about the girl's father. And when I tell you, she talking about, well, your daddy cheated on me. That ain't what he said. He said you cheated on him with dooba dooba. I'm talking about a whole conversation. Baby girl know all the tea on both end and having a whole conversation with her mom about who cheated on who and who did what and bop it a boop it a.
To a baby.
To a back. She wasn't even a teenager.
It doesn't matter. That is not information that a kid needs. at
Period.
any point. It's not information that the
Oh,
kids need. And I feel like, especially in our communities, especially when you have a mother who has a daughter, we're very hyper focused on giving them the real, because we know that a lot of times the world is not very welcoming, not very loving to women, to young Black girls, and all of that. So I feel like Black mothers, especially, have this over feeling of worry that they're not going to prepare their daughters enough. They're not going to be strong enough to withstand like the trials and tribulations of what it means to be a Black woman in America. And I think that Black fathers do that to their sons, right? Where they know their own experiences, so they become very hard and hyper focused on that not being their reality, to a fault. Like, you think it's preparation, but then we don't understand like
then it
what
become at
that
one point, is
does.
it preparation or trauma? Like,
It's trauma.
where does
It's
that
at no
shift?
point is it preparation, because you can have that conversation and you could prepare without giving that tea or without going into detail about that other parent. It's
Yeah,
not necessary. And what, as we all know, and what we're talking about with kids see everything, I feel like sometimes we don't give children enough credit that they're gonna recognize
yeah,
and see for themselves, and they gonna figure that out for themselves. They don't really need you pushing that on them or making or forcing it down their throat. If their father, excuse me, y'all, if their daddy ain't being involved and their daddy is not, showing up for them, and they not doing this and they not doing that, they gonna see that on their own. You don't need to
yeah.
point that out. You're gonna see
Right.
it as a child that experienced that. I saw it for myself. I saw it. I experienced it for myself. Nobody had to tell me a thing. I could see it, and I knew what it was. And so, I think we need to give kids that opportunity to understand that on their own. And it's actually better for their social emotional growth, because when you're talking to them like that and you talking to them about their other parent, they internalizing that. It's like, okay, well, I'm half that person. And don't let them do something that triggers you or reminds you of that other person. Then
Yeah,
they really gonna feel some sort of way. They gonna really feel like you talking about them. And we just got to be very, very mindful of how we talk about each other, even if it's not a romantic situation and it's not necessarily kids involved, just as a community. Like,
yeah.
not talking about, I never ever have let anybody talk around my son that Black men ain't this and Black men ain't that. Like, no, you're not gonna talk like that around my child.
Because first
You're
of all,
not
you
gonna
was
talk like,
alive.
it's not happening, because he's going to hear that. If you're saying that
Mhm.
Black men are this way, and they're at the bottom of the barrel, and they're all of these things, you setting him up to believe that that's who he is, and that's not who he is.
At
You
all.
get to decide who he is. You don't get to decide that for him. And so I don't want him taking in any of that, any of your messaging, because that is exactly what it is. I don't let people say the same about girls. I don't want my daughter hearing, that she's fast, or girls are fast, Black girls are this and Black girls. No, because that's your narrative. That's not who
Mhm.
she is. You can't tell her or make the decision for who she is. So we just got to be really mindful about the way we talk about each other, even if it's not in spaces of, parenting or co-parenting. Just as a whole, we don't need to be downing each other in
Right,
front of each other. We
right.
don't need to be doing that. We don't need to be calling each other out our names in front of kids, because all of that is giving them the impression that you're talking about me too. So why would they care?
And I think the thing is, we have to realize is that on a spiritual note, we are manifesting the life we live, right? And life and death lies in the power of the tongue. For all the
Mm,
people, believe in Bible,
yeah.
that's word. But spiritually, just in general, that's word. Because
Hmm.
it's frequencies and vibrations that you're putting out into the universe. We are all frequencies and vibrations. The earth move at a certain frequency and vibration, so does the other planets and the sun and everything else, right?
Right. Facts.
And our minds are very powerful, but they can be programmed and deprogrammed in certain ways. And so what you're saying to yourself or what you're pouring into the people around you that they're receiving, you're creating programming in their mind, especially when we're talking about our babies. our children,
Mhm.
right? Because everything's new to them. They don't know one way or the other what things are until we show them or we tell them. And so whatever we program into them becomes their normal, whether it's right or wrong on the grand scheme of things, morally or anything else. Whatever program becomes their sense of normal and becomes life for them. And so why not speak life to yourself, but also to your children, and give them that much of a fighting chance at life? Life is going to be hard enough. Why not start them off with love, light, positivity, affirmations, and do the same for you? Because even if you didn't get it as a child, even if you got to overcome some things, once you know better, you have to choose to do better. It starts with conversations like this, bringing awareness to the greater issue of something we might think is just small, but is large.
It's
It's not that small. Like, we are literally speaking damnation to ourselves and our babies, and we can't live a life of luxury and joy and vacations and all this other stuff that we want if we're speaking hate and damnation to ourselves and our lineage. That's ridiculous.
it,
It don't go together.
it carries with them into adulthood. I know for
Absolutely.
me, I spent a lot of time as a kid um, second guessing my choices because my mom was always like, I'm gonna tell you what to do and I'm do what's right for you. But sometimes I would feel like, okay, that doesn't really feel right to me, right? So if I would push back on that and make that mistake, I would not get a good response from my parents. Like, they would be upset about, it wasn't the right decision and I may not make the right decision. But I grew up like being so hesitant and afraid to make the wrong decision. And it's taken a long time for me in adulthood to unlearn that inner voice. Because to your point earlier, what you hear or give in the environment for your kids, that becomes their conscious.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a conscience. It's created over time. So whether that's you or they conscious for when they're young and they're really trying to figure it out, and then at a point once they grow and develop, they become their own conscious. If they're spiritual, God kind of influences that consciousness also. But up until that point, like whatever messages you give them, that becomes their conscious. I had some good things from my parents, like where I was like, okay, that was a good conscience. Like if my friends was out doing some stuff where I was like, look now, I ain't doing that with y'all. Cause if I
Right.
get y'all,
That's a wrap.
I'm not doing that. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna head out. I'm gonna go home, get on my bike, and I'm gonna go home. And then there were times where I knew I was gonna get in trouble, but I did it anyway, right? But how we handle that, those kids take that into adulthood. It becomes
Yeah.
their map for how they navigate their lives in the world. So if you constantly feeding them these messages, it's going to follow them into adulthood. So when we start talking about how we feel like men don't make these certain decisions and these certain choices, and this is what we really need, but we got to really give them some grace because they're messaging before us, before they came into contact with us, before we started dealing with each other. Are we thinking about what their messaging was? Because when I go back and I look about the messages from the generations, and I was just having this conversation about the messaging and looking at the messaging, and I feel like my generation, which I know I'm only 25, but
Right. That
even though
part.
I'm only 25, my generation is like the late 70s, early 80s kind of generation. And we 80s babies kind of say we all together, but I really don't feel like that. I feel like the first half of the 80s was just a little bit different. The second half of the 80s, y'all more like 90s kind of babies. But we can debate that later. I'm not gonna go there. But
Well,
anywho,
this is a different topic.
but I'm just saying, I feel like that age group of us was when we start to kind of really look at the messaging and think like, no, something ain't right about this. And we started really, really pushing back towards some of the messaging. I feel like my parents' group, they were still trying to follow the rules, right? Like they were still trying to abide by what their parents were saying and just stay in line. I feel like we started to rebel around the late 70s, middle 70s, early 80s. Like that's a whole other generation. And when I started reflecting on just how much like we're kind of like in the middle where we started the shift and we started the change, and I feel like the rest of the 80s and 90s babies and millennials are kind of like going more in that direction, right? I just really think about that messaging, like dang, like our parents was getting some real not so good messages, like hate messages. But when we think about it, it's like their parents were coming off of Jim Crow, and their grandparents was not too far removed from slavery. So like the world was very
No.
different, and they were still trying to navigate and understand how to find their voice and push back against the system and things. But I need us to kind of have like that same awareness now and realize that what our messaging is going or growing into is not good messaging, and we need to be very mindful of that and how it's going to shape the future generations and shape our future world. And so when we're talking about, oh, these kids are so disrespectful and these kids don't know this and these kids don't, okay, but what's the messaging? And it's worse now because
Because you know what I was thinking about while I'm over here making faces the whole
I
time.
know, but let me finish this point because
Mm-hmm.
these kids have more messaging than we did. So we didn't have the internet. We didn't
Right.
have YouTube and TikTok. We didn't have Facebook and all of these other things that's giving kids messages. Like what your mama said was what your mama said because you didn't have exposure to a lot of the stuff that these kids
Right.
have. So they're up against a whole different set of messaging and just things that they're getting bombarded with every single day that's becoming their conscious or not lack thereof. And we got to really be mindful about what we're speaking on in every aspect, not just when we're in the home, but what are we things we're sharing online? What things are we saying to folks? Because their exposure to messages is very, very different than what we grew up with. But you was about to make a point, sis. Go ahead. What was your
I
point?
was just gonna say, but why? That's all I want to say.
But why? That needs to be
But
on a shirt.
why?
That needs to be a whole shirt.
But why? Because I mean, that would, if we truly stopped to think, but why? On every
Mm-hmm.
occasion, like every situation, there is not a single situation that this doesn't work in. Like, we can honestly start rationalizing and moving forward in a way that's less detrimental to us and people around us. Because if y'all checked out the full agreements, we know that the second rule is don't take nothing personally. It's not about me. It's not about me. But no matter what someone does, it's not about me. Because if you can stop to think, but why? You know what? I bet you can come up with some answers. Like you just said, your parents moved based on what their parents taught them and what their parents taught them, and all the way back, and so on and so on. And so we can direct line see how and why we're doing the things that we're doing based on our ancestors and the way they had to move for safety reasons. You know what I'm saying? So the but why removes your emotions from it to a certain extent. It makes you think about what's actually happening, why it's happening. And then you can make an educated choice on how you want to move around moving forward. But why can save lives out here in these streets.
I mean, when you start asking that, I just was talking about that um, at work one day because at the new work, for those of y'all that don't know, I done transitioned out, but at the new work. And one of the things that I have really taken with me in my professional career is when you become very trauma informed, when you really understand how behavior and trauma work, because everything we do is influenced by something, whether it's emotions from something we've experienced, from just knowledge, maybe reading, just but really from experience. Like experience shapes so much of who we are, whether it's good experiences or bad experiences. But when you start to really become trauma informed, it opens up your world to so much. I am standing here today still trying to do the work that I do, right? The work and that we do here, oh, we gonna talk. Because I have that trauma informed lens, because I get it. It don't got nothing to do with me. A lot of times when people are reacting, overreacting, underreacting, whatever, is because of something internally. And we're all navigating our experiences, our traumas, and trying to figure out how to deal with each other, because all of us have our own trauma, have our own experience. So we're trying to figure that out. Like, how do we coexist with each other? How can we make this work? How do we, be bothered with one another? And so when you really go into things understanding that it really has nothing to do with you, and a lot of why people are the way that they are is because of their own experiences, their own traumas, their own understanding and perspectives of the world, you got a little bit more grace and patience for stuff than you didn't think that you would have for people and for things.
And doing that same, but why for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very easy to analyze and look at other people's lives and point fingers and all this other
Ooh,
stuff, but it's
yes.
hard. And a lot of people can't sit and look in the mirror and say, what am I doing? Where are my faults? And where are my issues? And where it come from? But why? Why do I act like this? Why do I make these choices? And then how do I move past them, move through them rather? How do I get better, become better, and the best version of myself? That's the real work. Because it's easy to look at
Ooh, that's
somebody
the
else.
that's the work that we run away from most of the time. When you
Right.
start, if you
You
start
can
talking
write
to
somebody
people,
else's biography. You
but
reading their
I
whole life.
had this conversation with Robert where I was like, I noticed when I've talked to people that have gone through therapy, they always exit therapy around the same point in the therapeutic process. So it's easy to go to therapy and talk about how others have harmed you.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard as hell for you to go to therapy and talk about how you have harmed you.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the nitty gritty, the dirt, the trenches, that's where the therapeutic stuff really starts to do the work, because you have zero control over what other people are going to do, but you have all the control over what you
100%.
are going to do. And so when you are put in that position that you have to be holding yourself accountable, it's the time where most people really realize that they're ready to heal or they're not, because that's when they
Mm-hmm.
run. That's when they start being like, I done got all I can get out of therapy. And the therapist can't help me anymore. Like, no, they can. You just don't want to do that work yet. You
Because
don't
the
want to go
other
into
half of
the
that
truth.
is they can't help you if you ain't willing to help yourself.
And that's really what therapy is all about. Ultimately, it's not even about venting. It's not about that. Like, the
Which is
venting
what
part is
most people
good.
want it for. They just want to go and talk.
No, you got to start asking yourself the tough questions. Like, back to that self reflection. I do that every single night.
And that's
I'll
what's
be up in here every single night, whether I'm journaling or I'm writing or I'm just processing the day. I'll be in here venting to Robert. But by the time I go to bed, everything that I done said to him, I'm frustrated about, I done looked at it and said, okay, but where do I fit in it? Like, why? But
mm-hmm.
why? Like, why did this upset me? Like, what is the real feeling? Because I feel like that's the other part of like social emotional growth, is understanding like what you really feeling. You throw around I'm mad and I'm frustrated a whole lot, when that don't even necessarily be what it is. It's just easier to draw that emotion. Sometimes you're hurt. Sometimes your feelings is
Mm-hmm.
hurt. Sometimes you just feel like you're messing up all the time and you just can't get it right. You need to really, really be honest with yourself about what your feeling is. And you need to address that. And you need to go over that in your head and figure out how you can be the change, because you really are the ultimate change. You don't have any control over anybody else, but you can change you. That's it. That's all. And so
Right.
we need to be very cognizant of that every single day. When we're dealing with each other, when we're dealing with our kids, we need to talk about that. Even in, why are you talking bad about this other person? Like, why are you talking bad about this other
Right.
person? Like,
And so
are you
passionate about it. Like it's
right?
something
What is
connected
it?
here.
Go ahead. Yeah,
It's some
exactly.
feeling there. And I was talking to my coworker about that social emotional learning. Okay. It's so important because, like, when you look at the way these young people are moving, the way these adults are moving, the way we move as a society, we're all moving from hurt. And I said it once, I said it again. I'm never gonna be the last time. Hurt people because it's fact. And it's fact. And we're not teaching our children, which turns into adults, right? How to handle their emotions, how to understand their emotions, how to articulate how they're feeling, let alone to see the signs of other people, to see how they may possibly be feeling or what they might possibly be going through. So if it's not taught, it's a skill. They're not just going to magically have an epiphany and be like, you know what, I feel this way. Let me precipitate on how I feel and tell you all that. It's not going to happen. And then,
It's not
especially
gonna
with our
happen.
young people, because they're going through puberty, hormones going crazy,
Ooh,
adults' emotions be crazy, and we don't know what to do with it. Imagine going through puberty and you like him or she like her or whatever it is, and you got all these feelings going on, and then people talking because that's what they do, and
look, I've been going
that's why
through
you
it just
keep falling
because
off slapping people.
adulting ain't always fun. Like this stuff is ghetto. Like I give it 0 stars sometimes. It's like now if I could go back in time and see past Sante when you have those moments when you mad at your mama daddy and did something and you go in your room, you like, I can't wait till I'm an adult. When I'm grown, I'm gone. That
As soon as I turn 18.
look,
Ooh, child.
I didn't know what I was talking about because this is not for the faint at heart. This whole adulthood thing, it's the struggle be real. But
And
to
you know
your
what?
point,
I am actually all for micro dosing on training young people about adulthood.
woo! That
I
look, is that an we
I'm
go
for
talk?
that. I am so for that. Just like micro dosing it. Like I don't want them to have to grow up and pay bills all super fast, but micro dosing them on it so they understand. Because when you understand, you have a greater appreciation for the people that's doing it 24 hours a day. You know what I'm saying?
You
Like
do?
chores is one thing. I saw, I think it was on like Family Swap or Wife Swap, one of them shows that used to be, I think ABC Family or something back in the day.
It's probably wife swap because I used to love that.
Baby, they went to one household and the mom, of course, they do complete opposite. So one mom was
Right.
like spoiling her kids, they ain't have to do nothing, living in a life of luxury, right? And then the other family was like microdosing their kids on adulthood. So they would pay them for like chores and stuff like that, but then they would have to pay a percentage of
Taxes.
it back.
I remember that episode because
And I'm
I
like, I'm for it. I'm for it. Because like you don't know how many times, like as a child, you don't know you gotta have toothpaste, tissue, soap, shampoo, conditioner, paper towels, dish soap, the things that you're not even thinking about that your parents have to pay for, right? And you just think they magically appear. And you don't know till you get your own apartment that things get real. You feel me? Like,
I'll never forget. True story. Now, of course, I realized that because I didn't leave home until I got married. So I didn't live with Robert until we got married. We had 2 whole kids and everything, but I was like, no, until we get married, I'm staying at home because I was not gonna do that. So anyway, that's a whole nother talk, a whole nother show. So, even at my parents' house, I pay bills. Like I pay bills, I bought toiletries for the house. Like that was an expectation. It was like you an adult, we all in here wiping our butts. You see, we need tissue, get tissue. So I would, grab tissue sometimes. But I didn't have to do it all the time because my mother was really, really big on buying tissue and paper towels. Like she would go to Costco's and she's
both.
like that, where she would, you know, I hate to admit it, my mama was probably one of the people doing the whole toilet paper, paper towel purge thing when everything was happening with
She was
COVID.
that person.
Cause like I couldn't get no toilet paper or paper towels in the store, but I was good because my mama whole basement was filled with paper towels and toilet paper. But that's a whole nother talk. I'm sorry to put your business out there like my, but it's the truth.
She's
But
prepared is
anyway,
what she is.
she was prepared. She was prepared for everybody. Like she was prepared. But I didn't have to do those things solely on my own. So when we
Right.
finally lived together, girl, we had ran out of toilet paper one time. I'm on the toilet and realize I ain't have no more toilet paper. I had to call Robert like, ain't no tissue. You gotta go get tissue. And I was like, now, did I really run out of tissue that fast? Like, I know I gotta buy it, but when just that alone, when it's like there ain't no help, you gotta
It's
remember
you, right? Like
it's
it's on
you.
you.
Girl, you gotta remember ain't no more milk. You gotta remember ain't no more toothpaste. You gotta remember this stuff on your own. Like that in itself
And
is
it gives you a greater appreciation for your parents. And that's what I mean by
good.
like micro dosing the kids, because when you a kid, you think everything is just everything. And you run out of something, you're like, how could you run out of this? What do you mean? Like, what else are you doing, adult? You know what I'm saying? Like, so if
What
you
else you got
showing
going
them,
on in life
right,
that you
what else you doing? You
forgot?
ain't no life parent, right?
What you
So
mean it ain't
if
no
you
milk? You
micro
got
dosing
one
them
job.
and you showing them like, all right, this is what it takes. Not only are you preparing them as a parent should to
Mm-hmm.
live a life without you, you're also teaching them humility and respect and appreciation for what an adult, a parent or whomever has to do to run a household and for their children. And so I'm all for microdosing. So Jaleel, best get ready.
I ain't mad at you because I probably should have been microdosing. I went to the opposite side of the spectrum. Like, for us, off the subject, but for us growing up, you left a fork in the sink. You was getting woke up to clean that fork. That's all them dishes in the sink. Like you ain't
All
leaving
the
all them
dishes,
dishes.
a fork
That
has several prongs.
listen,
All
if you're watching, go on and drop it in the chat if I'm lying. You didn't leave a cup. If somebody came in there after you finished washing dishes and put something in the dish in the sink, oh, you was hot because it was like you wait till now to put this in here because you leave it in there and go to bed. You getting up and you gonna have to come and wash all them dishes about your sleep. We had chores, we cleaned the whole house. Me and my brother cleaned the whole house.
kids don't do that no more.
I didn't
They
want my
don't know what
kids to do that.
cleaning is.
I didn't, call me a pushover. I did not want my kids to do that because I hated that as a kid. Oh my gosh.
But you know
Because,
how to clean up, don't you?
listen, I was like, okay, so what? They don't know how to clean up too. They do clean up. Like Kyra room be pretty decent. I'd be like, okay, for you,
Yes, sir.
you be
Yes,
here,
sir.
keep it clean. They both keep their rooms pretty decent. So they know how to clean up and they do clean up. But I always felt like that wasn't fair as a kid. It was like I go to school for 8 hours. I had to come home and do homework. Okay. And then I gotta clean up the whole house. Like I gotta do all my chores before I go to bed. Like I just hated that as a kid. And I refused to do that. But now I be looking at these kids and you ask them to do the smallest things around the house, they be, I be like, oh, you just don't know. Somewhere, someplace, there's a whole kid that's busting suds. You better shut up. You got a
Baby.
whole dishwasher. You better be quiet.
Well, it's
I
kids out
was
here
the
raising kids. Now, I don't condone that, but
dishwasher. I was the dishwasher. It wasn't no HG in my house. I was HG. I was, washing and busting the suds. You better be
you
quiet.
hear me?
But I get to your point about, micro dosing them with adulthood and keep teaching them responsibility,
That,
but to bring
again, age appropriate
age
level.
appropriately. But
Yeah.
to bring it back full circle with even how dosing them can be useful with what we share with them too. Like how much are we exposing them to when we're talking about the realities of each other? Because I know that now that Naraya's getting to the age where she'll be dating, because I'm about to have a 16-year-old. I started dating at 16. So I'm like, as long as her mental is in it and she knows and she understands the things and concepts that we're instilling in her, like I'm all comfortable with her dating, of course, with supervision and just support, etc. Right?
And I've heard her speak. If y'all missed those episodes, We Gonna Talk, please go watch them again. I ain't worried about baby girl.
And that is part of the reason why I'm like, when she, when that time comes that she meets somebody and she wants to date, all for it. I mean,
I am not one of
Dad,
those
dad is he's understanding that it's coming, but he's still kind of like, I don't want to have to deal with that. But he understands that
because you can't date to the
it's
period.
approaching, right? But I've had a lot of conversations with her about my past experiences with dating, but I give her bits and pieces. And it took for her at one point, like we were just having an open conversation, right? And she was like, okay, you mentioned this before, but you just kind of like grazed over it. And I really want you to go into detail about what you mean about this because I'm curious and I want to understand. And I still struggle. Because it was like, I don't really want to tell you this. Like, I don't want to go into it. I'm like, okay, so let me see how I can say it where it's still kind of, you still my baby. Let me see how I can give you
Age
this
appropriate.
reality. But it was still age appropriate, but I still just didn't, it was more about me than it was about her. It was just like, I wasn't ready for her to know some of the things about her mama yet. It was just like, I don't know, I want you to know this about me yet. But okay, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and be honest and just be open and tell it to you like how it is. But
Yeah.
even when I was giving her the real on that, I was very careful because I did not want her to internalize that to me that that's going to be her situation or that's going to be her reality, right?
Right.
Because what I experienced in my dating experiences doesn't necessarily mean that those are going to be hers. I
Right.
ignored a lot of things. I was young, and just didn't
Y'all
care
were.
about a lot of things. So it was like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the same experiences that I do. And I think that in our heart of hearts, we have parents that really kind of tell those stories in hopes that we're preparing our children for those experiences and those instances, but sometimes we overstimulate our kids and we're telling them too much, or we're not speaking to them from a preparation perspective. It's more a hurt perspective, like
Yeah.
it's more a trauma perspective. So I have to be
Because I
very
was thinking scare tactics. Like some people tell their
right.
kids things like to scare them into not doing certain things or going certain places and stuff like that. And it's one thing we got to realize because decades later, centuries and centuries later, we still ain't figured it out. Kids gonna do whatever they want to do.
Whatever.
They're gonna do
You
whatever they
don't,
want
you
to
don't
do.
know
This
who's
has been in every
control.
decade. This has
You
been in every era.
they gonna try it and they may not tell you that they tried it. So you really can't prevent certain things from happening. All you can do is educate them. And education isn't scare tactics. It isn't trying to keep them fearful and trying stuff. That's just gonna make them even more curious or rebellious, one or the other. So it was like I get from why we may be trying to be very open and transparent with some of those experiences in hopes that it is preparing our children for the future, but sometimes it's so toxic for them and we're like construing like misconstruing their own perspectives that they'll have for the opposite sex. Like I'm very mindful of what experiences I share with both of them because I don't want them to internalize my experiences that it's going to automatically happen to them, or
Mhm.
my son is going to be like that because he's a boy. I want them to know like these were my experiences. But also, part of the reason this was my experience was because I decided to do A, B, C, D, E, F,
That's
G.
a learning lesson in it. So even if it was a traumatic or not happy experience for you, the point is the things we go through in life. I say this all the time. You're not taking L's as in losses, you're taking L's as in lessons. And so when you learn something, you want to pass it on to your children. So that goes in how you talk to them too. Because again, if you're coming from a trauma place in a situation, you're gonna be like, oh, when he did this or she did that, and a boop a boop a boop, instead of saying, you know what, this turned out this way, but I realized because the but why, if I would have paid attention to this, or if I would have set my boundaries up front, or
Mhm.
if whatever the situation calls for, which is making them or allowing them to make mental notes like, okay, maybe I need to identify my boundaries and figure out what that is,
Mhm.
so this
Mhm.
situation will happen to me. Like it turns it into a learning lesson instead of just trauma and shock value and getting beat upside your head with the experience, the scare tactics.
And it's just not, it doesn't help and it's not healthy. Ultimately, it doesn't really have the effect that we hope that it would have. And we got to really like stray away from doing that. We are approaching the 1 hour mark, but I really, really wanted to get into this conversation. And we kind of touched on it a little bit about the self talk
Yeah.
portion of how we talk about each other and what messages we're sending to our kids. And I started out by sharing like, I've had some instances this past week where I've been like talking out loud to myself or scolding myself or being hard on myself about something. And then noticing that my kids are ultimately doing the same thing and that they're internalizing that. So if they notice some of what I'm saying about me and them, they start to hate that part of themselves too. And it's not even necessarily that I hate that part of myself or I hate that about myself. Sometimes we get frustrated with certain things in life and we don't realize how the way we talk about each other, we're breathing that life into our kids also.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that I've been trying to make a special point in doing lately is just being very mindful about how I talk about myself. Just an example, I am like sometimes I need to drop some of this weight. Like this is not okay. I'm not trying to be like I love me and all, but I don't want to be fluffy. I want to lose some weight, right? But I have to be mindful of how I say that because if I'm talking about my figure, if I'm talking about how I look or how I perceive that to be for me, what happens if my daughter gains a couple pounds? What is she gonna
Right.
think about herself with that?
Right.
How is she gonna internalize that, right? Um, when I talk about myself and the fact of it's hard being so compassionate and being open, and sometimes I pour so much into people and I don't get that poured back, and I feel silly for doing that. It's like I know this isn't going to end well, but I just can't help just pouring into other people because I just love people so much, and then hating that part of myself. So then when my children are showing that type of compassion, they calling themselves, being simple or being stupid and naive. And it's like, no, 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 you being a good person. But I can't rightly get them to see that perspective if when
You
I'm
talk
being
them
that
down
same
on that
person
same part.
and
Yeah.
I'm talking myself down on that same part. So we have to be very mindful of how we talk about each other, how we talk about ourselves, everything we say about each other, everything we say about ourselves, our kids are absorbing, they are taking in, and it's becoming embedded in who they are and who they will become. And if we want to really be talking about like what's wrong with our kids and why these generations is going down this path, we need to take some accountability of some of the messaging that we have and how
Mhm.
we have those conversations with ourselves and amongst ourselves. We need to take some accountability in those words. It's a lot of kids that grew up hearing that part of who they are ain't shit. Whether it's
Basically.
because of their dad, whether it's because it's their community, whether it's because it's their mom, whether it's because it's men, whether it's because it's women, or because whatever it is that you all feel like is ain't shit. When we
Right.
talk about our kids and talk about that around our kids, they are internalizing that and they are now thinking that they ain't shit. And then we can't be mad that they act like that and
Right.
they operate like that. So we have to take some accountability in that messaging. Wrap us up with some closing thoughts from you, sis, before we head on out for We Gonna Talk. It's good to be back. We are back in rotation, y'all. Thank y'all for being very patient with your girl. One of the things that I am learning is that in order for me to do the work, I have to have the capacity. So when I
That's
need to
right.
take the time, I take the time and I
That's
recharge
right.
and I come back. But we gonna keep it on moving, and there should be more exciting things coming. But what are your closing thoughts on this topic? And then let's share some announcements. I have some announcements for once for everybody that I'm super excited to
Yes,
share.
announcement.
But what are your closing thoughts, sis?
My closing thoughts is understanding the power that you have. This is, I feel like I've been saying this for like months at this point. That's really where I'm at in life. I just want people, everyone, to understand the power that they have within themselves and to take your power back. We give away our power so easily, and then we fight for other things, but we give away our power. And what I mean in relation to this conversation is the power of our tongue, the power of our messaging, the power of what we say. There's power in that. Again, life and death. You create the life you want to live, but first you have to think it, right? Then you say it. And if you're saying you ain't shit, if you telling your kids they ain't shit, if you telling your spouse they ain't shit, if you know what I'm saying, you are speaking these things. Sometimes you got to speak it until it becomes, even if that's not what you currently see, and you got to believe it's going to be something different. Right? Like, even if you working on a part of yourself that you know you actively working on, but you ain't there yet, don't talk down about it. You know what? You a work in progress, but girl, you gonna be amazing. Okay? Like, speak it into your children as well. They may not be good at all the things, because ain't nobody good at all the things. But don't be like, yo, badass, yo, boo, boo, boo. No, let's stop doing that to our children. Because
We definitely gotta stop doing that.
I'm bad. No, you're not. I don't tell my son he's bad. I don't believe that ever has come out of my mouth. I say you're making bad choices. You're making bad decisions. Because there's always a choice. You have to deal with the consequences of that choice. Now, if you choose not to listen, this is what happens with that. If you choose to listen, this is what happens with that. You're making bad choices. You're not a bad person. And you can choose to make a good choice. It's never too late for that, right? So, like, it's the way we say things, and get it and granted that, you know, those are the things that was told to us. We ain't getting no whole talk about if you did something wrong. Yo, badass, sit down. You know what I'm saying? But imagine
how much of that have you, like, I've come across that so much, and I too never use that language. I never called my kids bad or said you being bad. If anything, I'm like, you busy. You are so busy. You being extra busy right now, and you doing the most. Let's not do that. But never like, I mean, because kids do the most sometimes. I be in awe. I be like,
son, you real extra. You being real extra.
I'm like, that must have made sense in their mind somewhere, but I wish I could kind of walk the path, that thought, like how that process came to be. But that's a whole nother, we gonna talk too, right?
I don't know if we ever get to the bottom of that.
there's no, and I was too a kid before, and I just, I don't know. But I hate you, sis. Carry on. I'm sorry.
Girl, I was looking back at some Facebook posts from a couple years ago, like 2013-ish. I was like, why would I write that? Like,
don't get me started on the Facebook post. The Facebook post be having me and my feelings like, ooh, like,
but we grow and evolve, right? You know. But my main point is that we have to take the power of our tongue back. We have to take the power of our words back, because words are powerful. They are vibrations. They are frequencies. The energy behind them means a lot. And we don't know how just that small shift in what we say to ourselves and other people, what that can do. You can literally save a life by just saying something kind to someone in a moment of need, and you don't even know. That's how powerful a word can be. And that's also how detrimental a word can be, because you can say something wrong to somebody in just the right moment or the wrong moment, and that can be the end of somebody or something. So that's how powerful words are. Words can hurt, but words can also heal and uplift. So take your power back, take your words back, and be mindful what you say to yourself and others, because it's that powerful and it's that important. And that's that.
Absolutely. Well, thank y'all for joining us tonight. Before y'all head out, I would love for you all to support your girl, as she has become a correspondent for Chicago Activism Magazine. I am the correspondent for their social emotional learning part of the magazine. The newest edition is out for purchase online, and I do understand that there'll be hard copies soon. But the online drafts are up. You are able to access those. Please support the magazine. It's a phenomenal magazine. This issue has some really amazing jewels in there. So please, absolutely, positively check it out. I have
Y'all
a
can
really
still get the last issue too.
Look, don't forget the last issue, who Miss Natalie Battles was actually the cover and the feature of
Wow,
that magazine. So we're still out there. So this magazine is amazing. Go out and support it. A lot of dope writing
for
in this
real, for real.
magazine. I'm so excited to be a part of the team.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sister. So, because if you know me, you know I love to write as it is, and if I can marry the two passions together, like I'm
It's a
so.
wrap.
I wrote an amazing open letter to parents out there. That letter is all about the parents that may have the kids that are not off to college this semester. I know sometimes we're really hard on ourselves about parenting, and we don't have overachievers, or we don't have just achievers. We feel like we failing as a parent, and so I wanted to definitely have a letter to parents out there that go through that, and let them know that no, it doesn't mean that you're failing, and it doesn't mean that your children are failing either.
Right.
That we all have different journeys and different pathways to success. So please, I'm begging you to try out this magazine. It's amazing writing in it. So just thank you. Shout out to Elle for having me be a part of this. Be looking out for her, y'all. She's doing a lot of dope stuff in the community also. So I'm very excited about that. Um, and I'm just excited to be really possibly coming out with some special talks on my own. Your girl is trying to get her business up and running with that, and just really going and having those conversations and providing insight and perspectives in different forms of trauma. So hopefully be looking out for that. It's coming. And we still, as we're heading into or deeper into the school year, like into the first quarter, I want to just also make sure that we're reminding ourselves to be empathetic for our kids. I know teachers are up against a lot. Teachers are experiencing a lot, but I really want them to understand that the people that really get caught in the middle of some of this are the children. So
Mhm.
please remember that some of these kids are carrying all kinds of trauma in their backpacks. They are not just coming to school with their school supplies. They're also coming to school with no school supplies, and they're also worried about food insecurities, and they're also up against a lot. There's a lot happening in our world, so just remember to be nurturing and to provide a little extra care for our little ones out there that are trying to navigate this crazy world. It's hard for us as adults, so we want to make sure that we're being compassionate and empathetic for our kids. So those are all of the announcements I have for now, but there'll be some announcements coming up, right, Natalie?
Yes, there be some big announcements coming up. And y'all, I really want y'all to understand this because it's lit. The Healing Gala is coming up, y'all. October 15th. Get your tickets now. Look at me when I tell you this. Let me pull the gas down, okay? Get your tickets now, okay? Get your tickets right now on sale. WeHealHeal.org. Exciting announcements are coming up really, really soon. And you're going to want to have your ticket already because you don't want them to be sold out, okay? Get your tickets. It's going to be lit. The Healing Academy, for those of you who do not know, is my arts and healing and education based nonprofit. So I was talking about some classes. We already know Sis gonna be teaching classes over there real soon. I told her before we went live, okay? But try to make sure y'all get y'all tickets to this gala because it's about to go down. Okay?
Yes, don't forget, y'all.
And it's an
Don't
art
forget.
auction. And we're going to be doing awards. Y'all be looking out because the honoree list will be coming out really, really soon. Y'all make sure y'all get y'all ticket. Just go get y'all ticket and say that I told you. Don't say that we ain't tell you to go get your tickets early because it's about to be live. It's
About to be, what the young people say, lit. It's about to
about
be
to be lit.
about to be
All the
lit.
way up.
Lit. It's about to be
Lit.
lit. Litty lit.
Fire emoji, fire emoji, fire
It's
emoji.
about to be litty lit. Well, I
Lit.
love y'all. Join us in 2 weeks. Remember, we are bi-weekly right now, but we hopefully will be getting back up and running and doing weekly. And then we will be doing seasons. So we'll take some more structured breaks so that we can recharge and continue the mission. Always remember, Natalie has got a lot going on. She's doing a lot of other great things in the communities also. So be looking out for those. We try and share those events as they come up. So yeah, you don't get.
Oh, and hold on. Before we leave, everybody go see The Woman King. Go see
I
The Woman
I am
King.
trying to go see it this
Go
weekend.
see it.
I'm trying to go see
Go
it
see it.
this weekend. I wanted to
Two
come
tickets,
to
tickets.
the
The Healing
viewing.
Academy Gala ticket and Woman King tickets. Go get both of them tickets today
Go
if
get
possible.
both the tickets. Go get both the tickets. Facts. Well, be looking out for new announcements coming up. I have a big announcement that I'm just waiting for to share with you guys. Hint, hint, Natalie, I'm just waiting to share that info with you all. But that should be coming out soon. We love y'all. Stay safe. Good night.
See ya.
Wait, I gotta hit the end stream.